I found this little baby burl on a white oak that had fallen about 2 years ago and didn't really know what to do with it. Lately I've been studying a lot of George Nakashima's work, getting ready for a bigger live edge build. I decided I would make a live edge marking gauge, or Kebiki as the Japanese would call it. No idea if that's the right pronunciation or not. I used a piece of painter's tape to give me some sort of straight line reference and took it over to the bandsaw. Once I had the bottom cut, I could draw a straight line and cut that, then reference that face on the bandsaw fence. But I forgot to lock the fence, so it drifted on me, so I ended up having to make the cut twice. Then I turned my attention to the beam of the gauge. I grabbed a piece of curly maple and ripped it down to 11/16 square. I wanted it to be just slightly wider than a 5/8 inch Forstner bit, and then I cut some stock for the wedge. I traced out the beam on the fence of the gauge on one side and found center by connecting corners. The biggest concern when dealing with anything live edge is finding ways to reference both sides, since there are no straight edges to pull off of. So I decided I would mark everything on one side, then drill through the center and all 4 corners. This worked, but using a bit this small, the burlier parts of the wood would grab the bit and pull it in one way or the other. So I was only able to drill 3 of the corners. With my holes drilled, I could lay out the opposite side, then use the center hole to reference the point of a 5/8 inch Forstner bit to hog out the waste from both sides and meet in the middle. In keeping with the Japanese theme, I thought I'd try out my new kakuri chisels I got for Christmas. So I know Japanese chisels are supposed to bend at the handle, but these were actually bent in the middle of the chisel, so I couldn't fully flatten the backs. I was able to sharpen the bevel, but having a curved chisel made the bevel want to lift out of the cut as I progressed. Super frustrating, but I was able to make it work. I just came at it from both sides until I met in the middle. Once I had the mortise cut, I tested the beam. It was a good fit and just a bit tight, so I took a few passes with my number 4. Next, it was time to focus on the wedge. I marked the width of the stock on one side, then used the beam itself to transfer the marks to the other side. This mortise would be tapered to accommodate the wedge, so I marked 5/16 on one side and 3/16 on the other. I established my outer lines, then started hollowing the mortise. You can really see the bend in the chisel here. If you know anything about Japanese chisels, let me know in the comments section if this is just me being a moron or if these chisels are in fact defective. I laid out the thickness of the fence on the wedge stock, then marked 3/16 and 5/16 respectfully to get the pitch of the wedge, and then I drew a line and cut it out on my benchtop bandsaw. I actually had to do this twice since my first wedge wasn't big enough to apply pressure to the beam. For the pin, I chucked a piece of brass rod in my drill and took it over to the disc sander to make a point. That point was to sharpen the brass rod. Then I drilled the appropriate sized hole in the beam. I cut the brass a little long and hammered it in the hole. That way, as I need to sharpen the point, I can just tap it down as material gets removed. Time for a test. After a little sanding and beeswax finish, the live edge marking gauge, or Kebiki, was done. Each flitch, each board, each plank can have only one ideal use. The woodworker, applying 1,000 skills, must find that ideal use, then shape the wood to realize its true potential. Or at least that's what Nakashima said. How'd I do, George? If you like this video, consider becoming a subscriber. I've got a lot of big plans for 2018, and I'd love for you to come along with me. Maybe even consider sharing this video with a friend or someone who might enjoy it. And as always, above all else, thanks for watching.